Hello. All right, I think we're live. Hello. Thank you for joining this live session about aviation. I'm gonna give it about maybe maybe I'll wait about 30 seconds before because it just went live, and then I'll talk about aviation today. Let's see. Mm-mm-mm. So today I will talk about aviation. And aviation is a very popular major at Green River. Not many schools at the community college level offer aviation courses. Green River is one of the few that do. We also have transfer agreements with other universities that have aviation. I think majority of the students that come to Green River plan to transfer to a four-year university with aviation majors, uh, and um, they want to make sure that they take all the courses that they need to transfer out to those universities. Green River, however, also has a bachelor's program in aviation. I'll talk briefly about that as well today, and all the other universities that a lot of Green River College students transfer to. First, I do want to talk about how different aviation major is from other majors. A lot of our aviation majors are commercial pilot students. They want to become a commercial pilot. Now, why would they want to come to USA to study to become a commercial pilot? The main reason is because unlike other countries, the flight schools and the way flight system is set up in the US, it allows it's very a lot more accessible. So if you are from a country that only has one or two aviation schools, you come to America, all of a sudden you have lots of aviation schools and lots of flight schools. So just in that Seattle region alone, I can name five, six, seven different flight schools within driving distance. And that's because flying in America is done both professionally but also recreationally. So a lot of people have pilot licenses that are not commercial pilots. They just like to fly um, for fun. And so because of this accessibility, lots of students do come to the U.S. to get that aviation degree and that flight training. Um, Now, if you want to pursue a commercial pilot degree in America, most students try to complete the 1,000 hour ATP. The ATP is the ultimate certification that you want to be a commercial pilot. Um, it's called Airline Transport Pilot Certificate. And so originally, the ATP certificate required 1,500 hours of flight training before you can actually fly, before you get that certificate. But because of how they lacked pilots at that time, they changed the law where if you have a bachelor's degree in aviation, um, that is under the umbrella of the FAA, right? So that follows FAA rules. Then it doesn't have to be 1,500 hours. It can be 1,000 hours. So that'll save you a lot of time. Um, Now, with an associate degree, which is a 2 year degree, that goes down to 1,250. So bachelor's degree, 1,000 hours. One associate degree 1,250 hours. And then if you don't have any aviation degrees, you'll need at least 1,500 hours to get that ATP certificate. Um, so just letting you know. And then also, one thing I do want to mention about aviation majors is aviation is, it's a technical skilled major, right? So you have to actually learn to fly on top of your academics, which means that it's going to be more costly because your tuition in any school, whether Green River or Embry-Riddle or UND, doesn't include flight training. So you have to pay your tuition and you have to pay your flight training separately. And flight training varies a little bit because it depends on how many hours you fly on what plane, um, what the instructors are charging. Um, some students they are able to complete their certification very quickly. Um, they're very good at flying. Some students they take longer. That means that the amount of hours needed to get all the certificates could vary by student to student. So with that in mind, I will go into the first question, which is what classes should I start off with? So studying in USA is kind of different than studying in other countries. USA, no matter what major, they really want to see a balanced student. So whether you are an art major or aviation major, you have to take general education courses. And you can see this by going to each school's respective websites and looking at their curriculum. Every curriculum will have an English requirement, math requirement, a social science requirement, a humanities requirement, because that's all part of the 4 year academic degree. So even though you're an aviation major and you have no interest in music or art or drama, they still take these because they need it for their general education. Okay? With that in mind, the most important class you should take is English. Every class in America is taught in English, right? Um, so if you don't have the English level, it'll be very, very difficult for you to take aviation classes in English. Okay? Aviation classes require a lot of reading and memorizing, and they use a lot of technical terms. So if you don't have the English level, it becomes more and more difficult. Okay? So my suggestion, if you decide to come and study in the US, is first take English and math. Okay, every major needs math. And then in your first quarter, if you have time, you can also take Intro to Aviation, which talks about aviation careers and different fields, and a little bit of aviation history. Okay, um, and that would be a good way to start your quarter. Now I'll go to the second question. So, what university should I think about transferring to? So, there are very good aviation schools in the United States. It's hard for me to say what university is better than others. I can tell you the most popular schools are Embry-Riddle, UND, Purdue. I think San Jose State University is pretty big. Western Michigan is pretty big. Um, and then there's a lot of smaller schools like Kansas State, Utah Valley, Kent State, Central Washington University. I think they discontinued their aviation program temporarily. So, um, but there are a lot of universities. Arizona State University is another big one. Um, and I don't think there's a wrong university. You just have to find what's the right path for you. Um, think about the reputation that each school has in your respective countries. That might help you with the connections that you can make once you complete your certifications. So if you come from a country that has a lot of connections with UND, that would be a good school to consider because that school has a history with reaching out to aviation industries in your respective country, right? So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is price. The price varies school to school. Some schools are private and they're very expensive. Some schools are public and they're much cheaper. Smaller schools, they want to attract more aviation students, so they might offer more scholarships. These are all things to consider when you decide to transfer to aviation school. Okay. Um, Another thing you should consider is weather. USA is a very big country, and the climate is different depending on where you go. North Dakota, it'll be freezing during the winter. Um, so you wouldn't be able to fly much, I think, during the winter. You'll do majority of your flying spring, summer probably. In If you go to Embry-Riddle, Daytona, they have hurricanes in the summer. So it's kind of like the opposite. That you probably fly, fall, winter, spring, but not really, later on in the summer. So definitely consider that. Um, if you go to, if you go to school here in Washington State rains 3/4 of the year. So majority of your flight training will probably be done in summer, a little bit of spring, and a little bit of fall. So what are the different areas of aviation? So aviation has many different paths. Okay. One is commercial pilot, which is the most popular degree at Green River. And then the other one is dispatch, um, which helps you get the FAA dispatch certification. And then there's like air traffic control, which means you're going to be working at the control towers. A lot of students do both. There's very few difference between the dispatch requirement and the air traffic control requirement. But one thing that international students have to understand is dispatch is you work for an airline. So and airlines are private. Air traffic control is a public because it's the airport. And airports across the world are owned by or run by the countries themselves. They're a public institution, right? So, um, as an air traffic control student in the United States, you wouldn't be able to work as an air traffic control personnel because public or government entities require citizenship or green card. But dispatch is you work for the airline, and so that is another potential route for international students. You could do the dispatch and the air traffic control together, and then go back to your home country. But you would probably a lot of home countries for air traffic controls require this government civil service exam, and that's something that you might have to prepare for if you want to work in your home country. Another option is aviation management. So aviation management kind of goes over just management in the aviation industry, but also airport, right? So airport probably logistics, personnel, um, you know, resources, waste management. I mean, it could be any of those things. Um, and so aviation management is a very broad business major with aviation focus. Some students ask me about aeronautical and aerospace engineering. Aeronautical and aerospace engineering is very different than the aviation path. So, if you want to do aeronautical or aerospace engineering, you would want to go and talk to an engineering advisor, which is also me, by the way. um, but the path you take is not similar at all. Engineering majors always require lots of English, math, and science, physics and chemistry. Um, and so you wouldn't take any of the same courses that an aviation major would take. So keep that in mind. And I would not put that in the same umbrella. Okay. So I want to share a little bit about the different potential schools. So I will share my screen real quick, and I want to show you um, the bachelor's program at Green River. So if you want to do the bachelor's program in aeronautical science at Green River, you would have to do the the associate degree first. So 2 years of the associate degree and then 2 years to finish your bachelor's degree. And you'll see these general education requirements. Okay, so that means communication, English, math, humanities, natural science, social science, on top of all the aviation courses you have to take, um, on top of the 60 credits of the associate degree that you took for aviation. Okay. Another site that I'll show you is Embry-Riddle. So this is Embry-Riddle's website. And they also list the course requirements for aeronautical science. And you can kind of see they have their semester school. So the difference between semester school and a quarter school, so Green River is a quarter school. So quarter school, every class is 5 credits. But in a semester school, every class is 3 credits. So in a quarter school, you'll finish your 4 years and have 180 credits. I think this is total. So the total credits required for a bachelor's degree is 180 credits. And at semester school, it's 120 credits. But the time it takes is the same. It's the same 4 years. Okay. So here they say they want 37 semester credits of general education, 57 semester credits of aeronautical science, okay, and some electives. So if you were planning to transfer to Embry-Riddle, you'll be working on a lot of these general education requirements. Right? So 3 classes, right? 3 times 3 is 9, of communication theory and skills, some humanities, some social science, more humanity and social science, the computer science elective, your math requirements, your science requirements, and probably some of these aviation classes. And I'll show you UND. So this is UND's bachelor's in commercial aviation. And you'll see here as well, right? They have English, Introduction to Aviation, English 2, Social Science, Math, Public Speaking, um, Fine Art, Humanities. Okay? They want you to take business class. They want there's elective, more more general education, math, science, or technology, more elective. And so I wanted to show you this because it it shows that every school, no matter what major, requires that general education. Now, the last thing I do want to talk briefly about is job prospects. So the COVID industry actually hit the aviation industry very, very hard. Before this COVID outbreak, aviation industry was having the best years of their um, of their shelf life. Basically, um, there's more people flying than ever before, more airplanes ordered than ever before, more countries buying up more planes, needing more pilots, And so it was on this big upward trend. And then the COVID-19 happened, and all of a sudden the international air traffic has shrunk by more than 50%. Now, the good news is you are currently not in the aviation industry yet. And most estimates say that the aviation industry will recover within 2 to 3 years. Um, so it takes a while to finish and to get that 1,000 hour ATP that I talked about in the beginning of this session. So I think it's okay to have, because you know the reality is, once the COVID is under control, uh, people are going to resume traveling, and it's globalization is happening whether you like it or not, and more people are going to fly, and that means more and more countries will need pilots. And so I think overall the future outlook will be okay. Not in the immediate future, not in the next 2 years probably, but if we're looking 4 or 5 years, yeah, it'll bounce back just like everything else. Um, One thing that I do want to confirm is that this pathway is a long pathway. So most education degrees, it takes about 4 years to get your bachelor's degree. This might take a little bit longer because not only pilot students do they have to do their education, but also flight training, right? So while other students are home playing video games after class, you have to get ready to do some flight training. Um, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. Some students they don't finish their flight training in time in that 4 years, so it takes a little bit longer, and that's fine. And that's not abnormal. The good news is aviation is a STEM major. It falls under the umbrella of technology, science, technology, engineering, math. And so there will be more opportunities for OPT. STEM majors, as you might already know, they qualify for a 2 year extension on top of their first year of OPT. So you could get your bachelor's degree and start your OPT as a flight instructor. And that's what most international students do. They work as a flight instructor. And as a flight instructor, they're able to get their flight hours to complete their ATP. If you don't finish it your first year, you can apply for a STEM extension and then try to finish it your second or third year. And once you complete your ATP, you can look for like a recruiter or look for it yourself to find opportunities to work for regional airlines to big commercial airlines. Okay. Um, so it is a long path. I think it's good to give yourself maybe like 6 7 years. It could be shorter. I heard that, so I'm not 100% sure now, but last year when I was speaking with, um, last year when I was speaking with um, uh, my partners at Embry Riddle, they were saying that because there's so many students that need flight training, the flight instructors are able to complete their 1,000 hour ATP way before 3 years. So and so they finish their because they're teaching flight schools like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they get all their hours done, and then bam, they leave. And then another job. So the fresh graduates take that position and teach the new students, and they get their 1,000 hour ATP pretty quickly and able to transfer. Um, there are opportunities for. I've heard of schools sponsoring the students' H-1B visa themselves because they want to hold on to their flight instructors. Because the flight instructors, once they get their 1,000 hour ATP, they tend to leave, right, to get a commercial pilot job. But schools need flight instructors, so I've heard of schools that sponsor visas just to keep those instructors at their universities. So there's always opportunities as aviation majors. Um, so right now, because of COVID-19, lots of pilots are furloughed. right? But those furloughed pilots will probably get back into the industry within the next, I would say, some are already back, some are probably gonna get back, and a lot of them will probably get back, and this year or next year. Now, I don't think these pilots would be the new competition for new fresh graduates in 4 or 5 years, um, because there's always pilots that are retiring, and majority of pilot age group is in the 50s and the 60s. So you will see a massive number of pilots retiring within the next decade. And on top of, if the COVID is under control and aviation industry starts expanding again, they'll need more and more pilots. Um, and other countries, like I said, have 1 to 2 aviation schools that just cannot meet the demand for all these pilots, right? So they have to meet the demand elsewhere, and they'll probably, you know, if you have the FAA certificate, FAA ATP certificate, that would probably help you. Um, Now, I don't expect our students to that transfer out to these schools that get all the ATP certificate to get their dream airline job right away. And that's true with any job, right? Any fresh graduate, they're not gonna get the job that they want right away. You'll probably have to work for it. You'll probably have to work in a country that is not the country that you want to live in. Um, and that's fine. You gotta build your resume, right? So one of the one of the Embry-Riddle graduates that I talked to, he worked in his first job was for a regional airline in Louisiana, and he doesn't want to live in Louisiana. He wants to go to Hawaii eventually, but that's where he got started. And don't feel like that's unfortunate, because that's just part of like any professional setting, right? You have to after you graduate from university, the first job is probably not going to be your dream job. You're probably not going to be the pilot for Cathay Pacific or Emirates, maybe, um, or I don't know, JL. But you can work from a regional airline and move yourself up. So before we wrap this up, do we have any questions? I think overall, I'm pretty optimistic about this major. Most students at Green River are still in their beginning stages. They'll probably transfer out, take about 2, 3 years to graduate, and and then start working on their ATP. Usually, students that graduate with a bachelor's degree have about 300 to 400 hours of flight log. So they still have, long ways to go to fill that 1,000 hour ATP. Um, let's see. I do want to mention that schools compete with their flying. You know how universities in America have football teams that fight that match up. Now, if you want to go to these big aviation universities, they have flight teams, and the flight teams will also compete. And if you are able to make it into the flight team, the school does actually subsidizes your flying, so you don't actually pay for your flying, right? So those kind of students, I mean, they must be like the top, right? Top students, but those students that compete for the school probably maximizes that 1,000 hour very quickly with little to no cost. So there are like interesting opportunities like that in the U.S. Now, I do want to for the final word. Like I said before, there is no bad university. There's only the right university for you. It's hard to determine which is the right university because everyone is very different, right? So look at the price point, look at location, look at what kind of job offers that previous graduates from that school gets. Okay? Every school has connections that they make. If you go to the Midwest, you might have connections with airlines related to United. I know when Central Washington had their aviation program, they had connections with Horizon Air, which is a subsidiary of Alaska Airlines. If you go to Georgia, you'll probably be connected job connections to Delta, right? So these are all things to consider. Um, Price, location, job prospects, and mainly um, how big their aviation department is, right? The facilities. Okay. Um, so UND, for example, spends millions to upgrade their aviation facilities because UND itself, the school, is one of the biggest employers in that state. So the state actually supports that school very well. So that's these are the kind of things that you should think about. And once you go in, it's like trying to become a doctor, right? It's so costly to be an aviation major that you don't want to quit halfway. So if you're going to go into this path, you want to go 100% in, try your best, finish all your certificates, get all your degrees, and get all your flight hours um, to make yourself most eligible uh, for job prospects. Okay. All right. I am going to wrap things up here. If you have questions, please email me. Um, my email is listed on the comment section, and I'd be happy to go over any questions you have. And if it's something more intricate, I can you can always make an appointment. I'll give you an appointment link if you email me, and then we can go over it together. And I can kind of share screen and go over how to do that as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You do not have to be a Green River College student, and I'll try to answer to the best of my abilities. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining me, and have a good night.